The narcissist is still controlling your life, not because they're still there, but because they taught you that everybody else's needs matter more than your own. And that means that you're still living by their rules. Think about how outrageous that actually is. They don't even have to be in the room anymore, and you're still abandoning yourself for them. Every time you stay quiet, every time you say yes when you mean saying no, every time you put somebody else's comfort ahead of your own, you over-explain yourself, or you don't know what to say because you're scared to upset someone, or you come out fighting to stand your ground only to realize that you pushed far too hard because you were so scared of not being heard. You are still living by the rules they wrote, and that's real abuse. I'm Angela Darling, and I help survivors understand why leaving is the false finish line. Because the abuse doesn't end when the relationship ends. It ends when those rules no longer control your life. People call that people pleasing. I call it evidence. Evidence that narcissistic abuse is still collecting a debt long after you've escaped. Do you want to know how you can tell narcissistic abuse is still running your life? Not because you're still talking to them, but because you're still living by the rules that they taught you. You say yes when every part of you is screaming no, not because you don't have boundaries, but because somewhere along the way, having boundaries stopped feeling safe. And you apologize before you've even done anything wrong. You explain yourself to people who never asked for an explanation, and you spend more time worrying about disappointing other people than wondering whether you're disappointing yourself. And you scan everybody's mood the moment they walk into a room, as though keeping them happy is somehow your responsibility. And you find yourself carefully rewriting your messages, not because you're choosing your words, but because you're trying to stop other people from becoming upset with you. And you notice the smallest change in somebody's tone, and your body reacts as though you're the one in danger. Yet, when somebody asks you what you need, your mind goes blank, because this was never about being nice. It was about staying safe. The narcissist didn't just teach you to keep them emotionally comfortable. They taught your nervous system that everybody else's emotional comfort mattered more than your own. And that's the real theft. They leave, but their rules stay. And as long as you're still living by those rules, they're still controlling your life. I think this is one of the cruelest things narcissistic abuse ever steals. Not your kindness, but your right to keep some of it for yourself. Because look at what it leaves behind. You become the one that everybody else leans on, while having nobody to lean on yourself. The one who understands everybody else's pain, but dismisses your own. The one who forgives, accommodates, adjusts, carries until one day you realize that you've spent years making sure everybody else feels emotionally safe, while never once asking whether you feel safe. And that's a real tragedy. You don't even notice that you're abandoning yourself anymore. It just feels so normal. It feels like this is just who I am. But no. That's what abuse wanted you to believe, because if it can convince you that self-abandonment is kindness, you'll protect everybody else at the expense of yourself, without anyone ever having to ask you to do so. And that's the real theft. The narcissist doesn't just steal your voice, they leave you believing you were never supposed to have one in the first place. And that's not your identity. That's the survival loop. It's your nervous system still living by the rules that were written for survival, not freedom. And here's one of the biggest lies narcissistic abuse leaves behind. You think you're a people pleaser. You think you're naturally kind, naturally easygoing, naturally selfless. But no. You became afraid of what would happen when you weren't, afraid of conflict, afraid of upsetting someone, afraid of being rejected, afraid of being punished, and afraid of losing any form of connection. Think about how cruel that really is. The narcissist didn't just control your behavior, they taught your body that being yourself wasn't safe. So you learned the rules. You kept the peace. You stayed agreeable. Don't upset anyone. Don't ask for too much. Don't be too difficult. Don't become a problem. And after living by those rules for long enough, you stopped questioning them. You started calling them your personality. That's why saying no doesn't just feel uncomfortable. It feels dangerous for you. Not because it is, but because your body still believes that boundaries come with consequences. And that's the real damage narcissistic abuse leaves behind. It doesn't just change how you behave, it changes what feels safe. And that's why so many survivors become emotional chameleons, not because they don't know who they are, but because somewhere along the way they learned it was safer to become whoever everybody else needed them to be than risk being themselves. And this is where recovery starts feeling so unfair. Because you've done the work, you've read the books, you've listened to the podcast, you've watched the videos, you know exactly what happened to you. You know you deserve boundaries. You know none of it was your fault. So why does your body still panic the moment that you try to say no? Why do you still feel guilty for protecting yourself? Why does disappointing somebody else still feel more dangerous than abandoning yourself? This is where so many survivors turn on themselves and say things like, well, I should know better. So why can't I just do better? Because knowing was never the problem. Your body is still living by the rules your mind no longer believes. You can't think your way out of survival. You can't shame yourself into boundaries, and you can't force yourself to feel safe when your nervous system still believes authenticity comes with a huge price. And this is exactly where so many survivors become trapped. They've left the narcissist, they understand the abuse, but they haven't escaped the rules the abuse left behind. And this is what I call the awareness plateau. The place where your mind has moved on, but your body is still asking you, is it safe to be me yet? And this is why so many survivors feel as though they're fighting themselves, because narcissistic abuse doesn't just leave memories behind, it leaves instructions. Instructions your body keeps following long after the danger has gone. Your body still braces for conflict, even when you're finally safe. You automatically abandon yourself before you even realize you're doing it. And somewhere along the way, you stop measuring your worth by who you are and started measuring it by what you do for everybody else. How much you tolerate, how much you give, how much you forgive, how much of yourself you're willing to sacrifice to keep the peace. And that's why you overgive, over-explain, apologize, accept behavior that you know isn't okay. Feel guilty for resting, feel responsible for emotions that were never yours to carry in the first place. Not because that's your personality, but because that's what survival demanded. The narcissist didn't just teach you to fear conflict, they taught you to fear becoming inconvenient, to fear having needs, to fear taking up space, to fear disappointing other people more than disappointing yourself. And that's the real damage. Your body becomes so busy protecting connection that it forgets how to protect you. And that's why recovery isn't about becoming someone new. It's about helping your body to finally realize that it doesn't have to keep living by the rules that were written to survive somebody who is no longer there. So if boundaries still feel impossible, please stop making that mean that you failed. It means your body is still trying to protect you, because there was a time when saying no came with consequences, when having needs created conflict, when speaking up became a punishment, when protecting yourself threatened the very connection that you depended on for survival. Your body didn't make a mistake, it adapted. It learned the rules that's helped you survive. But those rules don't have to become your future, because one day, no won't feel as dangerous anymore. Rest won't feel as selfish, and having needs won't fill you with guilt. You won't panic because somebody else is disappointed with you, and you won't feel responsible for keeping everybody else emotionally comfortable. And perhaps the most beautiful part, you'll stop believing you have to earn love by abandoning yourself. You'll stop shrinking so other people can feel bigger, and you'll stop making yourself smaller just to make relationships work. And you'll stop apologizing for taking up space in your own life. And one day you'll realize that you didn't become a different person. You simply stopped living by the rules that were never yours to begin with. You're still kind, you're still compassionate, still generous, but this time, none of it will cost you yourself. Because that's what real recovery looks like. Not losing kindness, but finally being able to include yourself in it. And that's exactly why I created the sacred coding method, because people pleasing isn't the problem. It's one of the ways the survival loop keeps stealing your life. You can spend years trying to force yourself to have better boundaries, trying to become more confident, trying to stop caring what everybody else thinks. But if your body still believes self-protection is dangerous, you'll keep finding yourself back in exactly the same place. That's what the survival loop does. It convinces your mind you've moved on while your body keeps living as though the abuse is still happening. My work isn't about teaching you to become a different person. It's about helping you to break the survival loop so your body no longer mistakes self-abandonment for safety. Because when your body finally learns it's safe, boundaries stop feeling like rejection, authenticity stops feeling dangerous, and you stop disappearing inside your relationships just to keep them. If you're exhausted from constantly shape-shifting to make everybody else comfortable, I've linked my free masterclass below. I'll show you exactly how the survival loop keeps boundaries, identity, and self-trust tracked long after the narcissist is gone, and more importantly, how survivors finally break free from it. And in the next video, I'm going to explain why so many survivors feel guilty the moment that they sit down to rest. Because once you understand why your body treats rest as a threat, you'll stop asking what's wrong with me and start asking the question that changes everything. What happened to make rest feel unsafe in the first place? Until next time, be gentle with yourself. There is nothing wrong with you. You may simply be carrying adaptations that once helped you to survive, and those can change.